What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JAR. JAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe.
And Amy.
Review. It's our weekly show where we go over the Magic stories as they're posted on Wizards' website. This week, we have possibly the longest title we've ever had in a story. The Arbiter of Law left chaos in his wake by the R&D narrative team. I haven't actually looked that up, but I'm pretty sure that's true. That's just the longest, at least that we've ever reviewed. But
unless
anyway.
there was like a short title and then like a colon and another like sort of subdivision of title.
Right.
But I don't remember that.
Right.
So
anyway.
If you do, leave it in the comments.
Yes, please do. Our quick review, or my quick review at the beginning, and then we'll see what Amy thinks as well, of course. My quick review is, this was good. We got a lot of, it continued what we saw from last week. A lot more questions were answered. A lot more theories were confirmed from last week. And if you missed last week's episode, you can go check that out. But yeah, I like this one. I think it's definitely worth your time. I think you should go read that before coming back here, because we're here to review, not summarize, as we always say, and we don't want to spoil it for you. Were your thoughts along the same lines or different?
I liked it. I don't know. I liked it. It was informative, I guess. It was not quite as interesting as I expected.
Okay, we can get into that, I guess.
But it's important to read it, I would say.
Yes, I think so. It helps to understand rationale and reasoning, and it really helps for character development, and I want to talk about that a lot today, because that's really important to me. That's what I took the most out of this story. So, but anyway, I would recommend going to read it and then coming back here, like I said. So please go do that. Enjoy it. On to the full review itself. We start as we have started with all of these. Now, I want to point out that Allison Lures tweeted out either today or yesterday, today being the day that the story came out, or yesterday, she tweeted out the fact that these stories are running, the events of these stories are running concurrently with one another. So, and it's the reference that she made, which I love, I totally understand it, is season 4 of Arrested Development. So if you're unfamiliar, go on Netflix, watch Arrested Development. It was okay, right? I'm not advocating for Arrested Development or anything, but the idea of a shared group, I mean, multiple characters all doing their own separate thing, but then coming together to a central location. And the only reason you know that they are now at that central location is there is a defining moment, whether it's an explosion, right, or something occurs, and it's so there are common threads that you can use to tie it together. So in this one, we had Watley and Tishana and Angrath in the beginning, all together, super happily together too, and Tishana and Watley look up and notice a body falling from the main building from the city of Araska. We all knew immediately that was Kumena's body, as it had been thrown out the window by Vona when Vona and Mavrin Fane came and took over the power over the immortal sun. So we now knew that that is when that moment was happening in the timeline, which is good because if you're jumping from character to character to character perspective, it's good to know where we are in the span.
Start at the same point.
Yes. And so now that we know that, that's great. That's really good context for us to understand how that works. I always appreciate that. We talk about that a lot. We have talked about that a lot, I should say, in JAR's past, where we're trying to figure out the timeline. We're like, okay, where are we? How long has it been since the last paragraph or the last story? Or, what's going on and when did this happen? And versus this is a lot more helpful because we can understand that these are threads that are just continuing from the previous stories. So in the and it's following the same pattern of non-Jason Veraska secondary characters to Jason Veraska's situation, right? And it splits it almost right down the middle in this story, whereas in the first story, I think it was much more heavily weighted on Jason Veraska's side. Then last week it was a little bit better, and this week it was much closer to being even. So we'll see if it swings back in the other direction, or if, since we saw this week that the floor kind of falls out underneath all the combatants upstairs into the room downstairs, maybe they all just mix together and we don't have to worry about it anymore. But we'll obviously we'd have to see on that. But I think my point is that I like that blending. I like that method of storytelling. I thought that it worked really well. I don't know if you had any thoughts on it.
It was good.
Okay, great. Strong opinions from Amy on this one. Yeah, I liked the fact that Tishana was able to realize or know that Watley and Angrath were both planeswalkers together, because she said to Watley about Watley's headache, she said, "Oh, you and Angrath drift on similar currents," which of course she did because merfolk and water analogies and stuff.
No, she said the pirate.
She and Watley and Angrath. Angrath is a pirate.
Is he?
Yes, he was on the pirate ship when Watley first saw him, which is why later on when Vona, I have it written down here, why am I struggling? Vona, Tishana, Angrath, and Watley all touched the immortal sun at the same time, or, gained the powers of the immortal sun at the same time. It was purposeful because it was one person from every tribe.
Right.
Vona was the vampire, Tishana was the merfolk, Watley was from the dinosaurs / Sun Empire, which only leaves Angrath as a pirate.
Oh, okay.
So I thought that was a cool through line of having all four of those.
Jace, and that's why I was like, when you said that, I was like, that's weird.
Well, and I guess if anything, she would have meant Veraska, right? Being the pirate and being the planeswalker as well. But yeah, in that moment, she meant Angrath, who was at the time squashed underneath the foot of a dinosaur, which, that didn't last too long. Angrath went all Godfather on that dinosaur and cut its head off and then threw it at its master. Wasn't quite left in Watley's bed, but I still call it Godfathering. Hopefully everybody gets that reference. Anyway, so I also thought it was interesting just to focus on bringing it back to this is a card game for a second. I thought that concept of Angrath being trapped under a dinosaur's foot, I mean, it lasted for a while, right? But then eventually using his chain or his fire abilities or whatever, he was able to cut the head off and burn it to a crisp, and he threw it on the floor and it hit with a meaty slap, which is an amazing line.
Yeah.
So descriptive. I loved that. But I thought that it was interesting, and I guess it's just flavor for the story, but trapped underfoot or something would be a really cool pacifism-like card, where the creature won't be able to attack or block because it's trapped under a big old dinosaur's foot. I think that would have been a cool card that would do something like that.
I think the sword one.
Which? Oh yeah, the naturalize. Yes, the naturalize with the pirate's cutlass underneath the dino's foot, the Brontodon's foot. Anyway, I just wanted to comment on that. I thought that was cool. We talked about that already. Then we get this fight, right? I liked this fight with different groups of, or different combatants. You heard about Mavrin Fane versus Tishana. You saw Watley versus Vona. You saw Angrath versus Vona. You saw Watley versus Mavrin Fane for a minute there. So all these groups were attacking each other, and then as we talked about, all four of them were able to activate the Immortal Sun at the same time, with poor crazy Mavrin Fane, being held up against the wall by Tishana's vines, which I thought was kind of funny because Mavrin Fane is crazy, and he's just to imagine him stuck to a wall, just shouting random platitudes like he likes to do, makes me laugh. I think that's funny.
I don't know. I think the fight scene, I guess, I think it could have been a bit more, like you said before, interesting.
Well, I also think...
I should say I expected it to be.
Well, I also think we're not quite done, because now it ended with the floor falling out,
Right.
with all 4 of them on the Immortal Sun. So, and if you remember, Vona, I thought this was fascinating. Vona was using the power of the Immortal Sun when she was standing on it to mess with Watley's blood.
Yeah, that was gross.
That was amazing. That's so cool that Watley was like noticing bruising under her skin because her blood was being manipulated by Vona's vampire magic. So cool. I liked that a lot. I thought that was creative. And then combined with the fact that...
but it's gross.
Oh, yeah. But then combined with the fact that Watley, using the power of the Immortal Sun, was able to kind of call upon the Elder Dinos. Now, we saw her card depicted here, her Radiant Champion card, which has Zakama, the 3-headed dino, the kind of the embodiment of the threefold sun, behind her, but she only referenced the 5 Elder Dinos, which, as we know from the set, are the 5 mono-colored dinosaurs, whereas Zakama is the tricolored dino of Naya coloration. And I just thought it was interesting. I'm curious to see if that actually happens, if Watley actually can control Zakama in some way, or at least call him to her, and then if what you were kind of surmising actually happens, where they are untamable. Watley's words, not ours.
I didn't surmise that.
No, but you commented on the fact that you thought that it was interesting that it used the word untamable, and yet Watley was immediately able to call on them, and they were kind of coming in that direction.
That's not what I said.
Oh, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
We have no clue what she was able to do.
Right.
She's not even sure what is happening.
Yes.
She's assuming what's happening.
I guess she was able to...
she's attempting to call upon elder dinosaurs, and we have no idea if she's actually capable of doing it.
Yeah.
And all we know about these dinosaurs, basically, is that they're untamable. So, yeah.
And that they were only stories, and it took her, whatever she said, like 2 years to learn the story.
2 years to memorize the stories.
That's crazy. That's too many. But that's fine. That's what she wanted to do. She likes that stuff. But
takes me a long time to memorize stuff too.
Yeah, that's fair, I guess. I mean, it seemed like, based on her description, that was odd, though, that for it to take that long for something. So, anyway, then we get on to back to the cliffhanger at the end was them falling through the floor, and now we're on to Jason Veraska. And we go back to where we left off with Jason Veraska, with Azor sitting there, finding out finally that Jace was and is the living Guild Pact. Now, I assume that Jace identified himself as the living Guild Pact in that way to Azor because he suspected that Azor was the Perun of the Azorius, or at least in some way connected to the Azorius, because otherwise, when has Jace ever walked up to somebody and said, I am Jace, the living Guild Pact? It just doesn't make sense. So it had to be because he knew of Azor's connection to Ravnica, to Azorius, to the living Guild Pact, whatever.
I was actually worried when he did that, because I thought he was showing his hand very quickly.
Okay.
This is a potential opponent, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just instantly telling them exactly what they need to know about you.
Okay.
Instead of being like, oh, well, I'm just some dude, but I'm going to fight you now. And then being able to actually be a good match for them because they don't know what to expect.
Well,
and I feel like saying, oh, I'm the living Guild Pact is like a good way for Azor to just be like, oh, well, I know what you're about.
Well, I
can defeat you in 5 seconds. I mean, that's not what happened, you know.
No, but I think...
I was worried that was going to happen.
And I think Jace's reasoning behind that, just looking at it now, was that he said it in an attempt to be able to talk to Azor, to be able to get information, realize what was going on, and to attempt to not approach the situation as a foe, right? And try to approach as either a friend or just knowledge of the fact that he is there for a purpose and whatever.
I think it was really just to approach it more as here's something that you might actually recognize.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I'm just some random young person walking in here and you've been trapped underground on this island for 1,000 years,
Right.
you're not gonna give a shit about me and what I have to say.
Mm-hmm.
But if I tell you, look, I'm the Living Guild Pact, which was this big important thing that you created, then that gives him a reason to listen.
Yeah. Yeah. And
but I was still worried that Azor was just going to be like, well, I know how to defeat you and I'm going to do that now.
Right. And I think that it only became confrontational once Jace and Vraska started gaining the information that they wanted in the first place.
Right.
Because they realized that, as you, what word did you call Azor? You just in general, you said he was a jerk. I don't remember the exact wording. He definitely turned out to be a huge jerk, because he really had this almost holier than thou or upper echelon of intelligence aspect to him, where he was like, well, I am the lawmaker, and so I'm the one who can go around and decide what laws are happening and what needs to happen. And Vraska and Jace, but mostly Vraska at this point. This was really, Vraska was being very vocal, and Jace was almost like, he was almost being that like alpha boyfriend of like standing behind her and like calling out, you know, shut up, let her speak, you know, as opposed to Vraska, who's pretty powerful. She could have probably been able to do it herself, but Jace was the one who like fortified her defenses and, you know, kind of clamped down on Azor's brain while he was talking to her, even when he would interrupt her and Jace would kind of clamp down and make him hurt, or when he was saying, you will call her captain, you know, and then Azor was kind of submissive is the word I was looking for. He became much more submissive to that, and I thought that was an interesting...
I didn't really see it that way. I saw it more as he had to do something because Vraska was just going to kill him. And Jace didn't want that. Okay.
That's fair. And they did end up talking about it, where Vraska was like, I'm going to do it, and Jace was like, I think that I have to do this one now. Let me take care of it, whatever. And that leads us to... I mean, I liked the background information that we got. We knew after last week that Ugin was involved in this plan, but we didn't necessarily know that he straight up was working with Azor, although now...
I think we kind of did.
Kind of. But now we find out that Azor, at this point, was not happy with Ugin, because... you know what it reminded me of? Very, very similar to Nahiri and Soren. Of, hey, you made me a promise of coming back to help me after I did this thing for you, and you're cool, right? You're going to come back and help me, right? Because you promised you would, and so I'm going to stay here for, what, Nahiri was 5,000 years and Ugin was 1,000 or something? So... like, it's like, okay, well, I'll chill here and I'll wait for you, but just make sure you come back for me, because I can't leave if you don't come help me and come get me. And for Azor, come help me restore my spark. For Nahiri, come help and make sure that these Eldrazi are dealt with, and I don't have to stay here and keep them in check and make sure that they all go, stay trapped in this mountain. And so that was an interesting parallel, but it's the same result of Ugin and Soren both also kind of having the holier-than-thou, I'm all-powerful, and so your measly mortal issues don't bother me.
I don't think so. I think shit happened to Ugin.
Well, Ugin did die.
So, exactly. So, I think Ugin was simply preoccupied and maybe not... alive. And I think Soren was just a dick. But, you know.
Well, now Soren's trapped in a wall, and
Good.
Azor, similarly, is trapped on Useless Island.
And sadly, I'm much more pleased with the fact that Soren is trapped.
Yeah,
Because I think that, I mean, Jace sort of brought up the point that Azor didn't deserve to die. I think he's just so old, and he just, all he knows is he's the lawmaker guy, and so he doesn't realize that times are changing, and he shouldn't just be going around imposing his will upon everyone. Back in the day, 1,000 years ago, maybe that was acceptable. Maybe that was what needed to occur based on just everything. I don't know. It's hard to know because we don't really know necessarily what happened all the way back then.
Yeah.
We don't know why this chain of events really occurred. All we know, pretty much, is that they were trying to catch Nicol Bolas.
Now, we were talking about this in the comments last week, because as we always say, leave your thoughts in the comments. We love the back and forth. We love hearing your opinions, your theories, etc. And we were talking about this last week. I really like the Ugin Azor plan that is now coming to light between last week's story and this week's story, because we've seen Nicol Bolas' story way out in the open. And I mean, by out in the open, I mean to us as readers. We were aware of Bolas' plan of Planar Bridge, Lazotep-covered Eternals, now the Immortal Sun. We knew that going in.
Right.
He made that very clear through his actions, again, that we as readers have seen. This Ugin Azor situation was not up front. That was behind the scenes, big time. But
well, and the thing is, too, that the Nicol Bolas thing was all along as well. Until we found out about it, that wasn't a known thing.
Right. Well, and especially
he was very deliberate and calculated and stealthy with all of it because he didn't want Ugin to find out what he was up to. And
obviously you have the Rahl Zarek aspect of it, which was super hidden, right? That was very unknown. And obviously, too, the Gatewatch is still super unknown. And I don't think the Gatewatch knows that Tezzeret still has the planar bridge, or at least had the technology to further create it, because when he planeswalked away after the explosion with Liliana and Chandra and Gideon there after flying Girapur's Hope, he ran away, or he disappeared, and the something Intimations, I don't know why I remember that card name now, Dark Intimations was the name of the card that depicted Tezzeret on a sand-type plane. It might have been Amonkhet, it might not have been, but with the two side pieces of the planar bridge. And now we see, I guess, spoilers if you weren't aware of the Story Spotlight cards. Don't listen to what I'm about to say. But Story Spotlight 3, we haven't gotten to 2 yet, which presumably has to be next week because there's only 2 stories left. But Story Spotlight 3 is Mastermind's Acquisition, where the planar bridge magic is being used to steal the Immortal Sun, which, as we now know, is a creation of Ugin and Azor combining their powers together, Captain Planet style.
He's a hero.
He's definitely a hero.
Unfortunately, Azor, not so much.
So now we get to see these two plans.
It's like a classic story of, the abandoning friend is the one who's going to get all the glory for saving the world, and poor Azor is on Useless Island forever.
He's the Lord of Useless Island, though.
Napoleon. That's all I have to say.
So I like to see that
Napoleon was the worst. Never mind. Azor's pretty bad, but not as bad as Napoleon.
We're way
I'm
off
sorry.
the rails.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So I like seeing that these two plans have come together. I like seeing their threads if Mastermind's acquisition is what it seems to be, then it looks like Ugin's plan really badly fails, and Nicol Bolas's doesn't. At least not yet. There's going to be something that happens.
Yeah, I mean, all them Eternals are still a thing.
Yeah, and the Planar Bridge. Yeah. And now the Immortal Sun, which is super damn powerful, as we've seen. Because Watley Watley and Angrath, I guess, are the first two Planeswalkers to touch it, but with the Immortal Sun being the Immortal Sun, they couldn't Planeswalk away. I'd be interested to see what it would do to bolster Planeswalker magic. If that magic could be harnessed in some way without the drawback, which I'm sure Bolas and Ralzeric and Tezzeret are going to be working kind of hard to try to figure it out. But there are two other things I wanted to talk about really quickly about this story that came up for me. And the first one was Jace. I mentioned that we would talk about character development. Last week, Jace regained a lot of his memories. The main portion of those memories that I want to talk about, and I think I mentioned it a little bit last week as well, was his memories of his childhood and his memories of training under Alhammarad.
Yes.
Because he didn't have those memories. He gained those memories back. There was extensive training that he did. And Veraska, I believe it was last week, was the one who pointed out the fact that Jace seemed more skilled after regaining those memories because he remembered all of that training. He remembered all of the telepathic, or whatever you want to call it, training that he went through, combined with his kind of fumbled together training that he had without his memories, and that kind of only enhanced his power.
Yeah, I mean, he basically said that he could remember all the stuff that he learned, and he could also remember not knowing that, and all the things that he learned from that experience, basically, and then he was able to be a more enlightened person overall because of that. I thought that was really cool. And
that, I think, I was reading through Twitter today. Even before I had read the story, I was reading through people's opinions on the story, which I don't think that changes my opinion because, or I don't let that influence my opinion because, in fact, I have quite the opposite opinion of some people that I have seen discussing the story. And that opinion is, I heard some people saying that they thought that Azor being defeated was a little quick. We've talked about two situations at least that I can think of where that, in fact, has totally happened, in our opinion, with Brizella and Neheb. They were big characters, they were main characters. Neheb had 2 cards across 2 sets.
Main characters, but they were, you know.
They were big characters.
Antagonists.
Bruna and Gisela were 2 main characters from Innistrad who were then fused together into Brizella and then were beaten by Thalia with oh my god, why am I blanking on her name? Avacyn's Spear and Sigarda. But very quickly. And then Neheb, we just kind of heard about him being defeated by Samut. I believe it was Samut, maybe Samut and Jarer. That happened with those 2. And there seemed to be not a lot of rationale for that since they were pretty big deal enemies.
Yeah, except if the overall theme is that good triumphs over evil, regardless of the fact that they're maybe not as strong or knowledgeable.
But we brought that up previously. The reason I'm bringing it up now is because in this story, Jace beat Azor. Jace beat Azor quickly, Jace beat Azor easily, and Jace made Azor look like a little kitty cat without any powers whatsoever. There's a reason for that, in my opinion. And my assessment of it. There's a reason for that. Jace is a hell of a lot stronger now. You don't want him to have gotten a hell of a lot stronger to then come up against a planeswalker that has lost his spark and has been stuck on a plane for 1,000 years and get caught up in some kind of a fight. Like a struggle. This was not a struggle for Jace. Jace is more powerful now. This was the way that we got shown that. The Parun of the Azorius from Ravnica got beaten by his own guild pact. His own living guild pact. And I think that that was very deliberate in the decisions that they made. And I didn't really see anybody talking about that, and I was surprised. I saw some people saying that they thought that he was beaten kind of quickly, and I don't see it that way. I think that there's a reason that he was beaten that quickly. I think that it's to show you Jace is new. This is a new Jace. And we've seen that in terms of his personality. Now we're seeing it in terms of his powers and abilities.
Okay, yeah.
I think that was very deliberate.
Sort of well-rounded interpretation of the person that he is at this point in time.
Right. Okay. And now, speaking of which, I'm going to throw this out there now, because I always love putting on a tinfoil hat, and I actually don't think this is that tinfoil hat. I've gone tinfoil hat before. But the other thing that happened in this story that I thought was quite interesting was Azor, the white-blue character of Azor, because Azorius, was throwing law magic, hieromancy, which we see that Gideon learned back when he was Kytheon. We see Azor using law magic against Vraska, against Jace. And it wasn't working super well because, as I said, Jace is super powerful now. But Jace was able to utilize his abilities as the Living Guild Pact to also use hieromancy. They made that clear in the story. Vraska pointed out that Jace was the one who came to judgment on Azor, and the law magic, the hieromancy, is what made Azor leave. And it's what made Azor kind of heal, if you will, using the animal training terminology. It made Azor sit back and listen to what Jace was saying as he was providing his judgment, acting as judge to Azor here. And he used hieromancy. So before I get upset that I missed another Nissa becoming part blue,
yeah,
I'm calling it now. At some point in the future, we will see Jace as a blue-white planeswalker.
Interesting.
Okay. That's my assumption. That's my feeling. He used hieromancy. I have never seen a planeswalker that did not have at least some white use hieromancy before. A character who has not had some white use hieromancy before. Okay. And I think that it somewhat will make sense when Jace goes back because two reasons. One, when I say goes back, I mean to Ravnica, because I assume that will be their next stop. But I could be wrong. But part one to that Ravnica theory is Jace has been working as the Living Guild Pact with Lavinia. Lavinia is from what guild, do you think? Azorius. He's been working with her as the Living Guild Pact. She's been the one telling him, Jace, you got to stay behind, you got all this paperwork to do. And she's kind of been a killjoy, right? But at the same time, she's right. And Jace realizes through his discussions with Azor in this story that he has been neglecting his duties. Azor tries to distract Jace, and even that doesn't work, but it does make Jace kind of think to himself, like, no, you're right, I haven't been doing that.
Took him fucking long enough.
Right, but my second thought on that is, what three colors are Nicol Bolas? Black, red, blue. So blue is part of what Bolas does. Jace now gaining hieromancy as white magic is something that Bolas does not do. It's something that might give him a leg up in their next confrontation, which, if you're having the Gatewatch split off and go in 5 different directions after being defeated by Bolas, you better believe when they come back, they need to have gained something before their next confrontation. Otherwise, storyline-wise, there should be no difference.
Well, except that Nicol Bolas will have gained something in the interim.
Well, exactly. But you assume all things being equal, right? Bolus is still improving, you're absolutely correct. My point is the Gatewatch should also be improving, not just, oh, well, we went over here, let's lick our wounds and then try it again later.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean anything.
Some basic-ass law magic ain't gonna do it.
Hey, again, if it's something that Bolus is not familiar with, it might. It might at least throw him off long enough to be that distraction that we saw Azor try to use.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not a writer of the story. I'm just throwing it out there that I don't want to kick myself the next time we see a white-blue Jace Planeswalker card spoiled, and I didn't call it when it was somewhat, to me, obvious in the story that he was using law magic, which, as far as I know, is white magic.
I think, I don't know. I think that I don't love this whole part white thing, because I think he's basically going to go back to Ravnica and be all guild packy now. And that's just going to be boring.
Well, I think it depends on what happens to the other members of the Gatewatch. Because he now remembered Bolus at the end of this story as well. And that was after, I believe, after he had felt the guilt of not being guild packy. So you have that kind of back and forth, and with him gaining white magic...
Yeah, but we also don't think that we're pretty sure that he doesn't remember what happened.
Maybe not. He only just remembered Bolus, but as we saw with the flood of recollection from last week, now if he is still sporadically gaining memories, I assume he will get there shortly.
It's not sporadic, it's when something serious happens. So unless he's going around bashing his head or falling through floors and meeting gigantic sphinxes, I don't think he's going to be getting all kinds of memories back.
Well, we'll have to see. I mean, it may just be something that reminds him, because the only thing that made it trigger this time was when Azor said we were trying to trap Nicol Bolas. And then that's when Jace remembered Nicol Bolas, because he heard the name. Who knows? What I do know is...
I don't know.
What's that?
I think there's got to be something more to it.
We'll find out. We will definitely find out. I mean, maybe he sees Gideon, and Gideon is hurt or something. Or, Gideon starts kind of talking down on himself, and, because that's how we kind of saw Gideon. The last time we saw Gideon was him kind of feeling like he was ready to acquiesce to Bolus and die, and was able to leave, right? Bolus kind of showed him a little bit of mercy, but really it was just like, you mean nothing to me, just go. It's not even worth it to me to kill you. So we'll have to see.
Right, because he's only white, and so...
Yeah.
Lame.
We'll have to see. We'll have to see who gains what from where. But for now, we have 2 more Rivals of Ixalan stories. They've been great so far.
Yeah.
Especially in comparison to Ixalan, which was kind of up and down, kind of so-so, depending on the story. I mean, there were like 1 or 2 good ones, but not all of them. These have been consistently good.
Yeah.
I like them.
Well, and that kind of goes back to what Alison Lord said, that there were only going to be this
5.
few stories, because that was all they needed.
Right.
And so I'm hoping they're cutting out the useless stuff.
Yep.
And only giving us what they really need to give us, and hopefully that will make the stories better, even though it will make for less JAR episodes.
Well, it'll be important when we go back to Dominaria, because there's a lot to cover, and you don't want them dilly-dallying on nonsense.
Yes.
So to practice cutting it down now is good.
Yes.
That's important, and we want that. So, guys, let us know what you thought of this story, of our theories. There were some heavier discussions there towards the end. I don't mean emotionally heavy, I mean like theory-heavy discussions there towards the end. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yes, this story was considerably less emotionally heavy.
Yes.
Which may actually be why I didn't find it as interesting. But
see, and I would say it's nice enough, because I think if that became the norm every week, it wouldn't be as special.
Yeah, we wouldn't appreciate it as much.
Right. And so we'll have to see. But like I said, please let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. You can check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Our links are in the description for that.
Yes.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much for watching. We will be back next week with next week's story. This has been JAR on Geek for All. You just joined Amy and I as we showed off our...
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
I got it. And please feel free to subscribe. You'll find out when all of our videos come out. We have draft videos every Saturday, these videos every Thursday, and paper magic openings every Monday. Thank you guys once again. This has been JaR on Geek for All. I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.